Okay, this is the lecture that goes with 326, which is the Battle of Ypres and the Race to the Sea. So yesterday we looked at the system of alliances that caused each of the states and countries within Europe to jump into war in the First World War. We looked at the actual agreements that each state and country had with each other that they were honoring and protecting at the beginning of 1914. Today we're going to look at a specific battle in World War I, which is the Battle of Ypres, the third of the three battles that are known as the Race to the Sea. And what the Race to the Sea is literally, it begins at the end of our Parisian conquest by the Germans that we looked at the failed end of the Schlieffen Plan. We looked at how Germany tried to take Paris very, very, very quickly without anybody really sort of noticing. They had sort of a look over here moment as they tried to sneak in to Paris. But unbeknownst to them, Great Britain was able to rally support and aid to the French army and to the Belgian army at Paris, and that drove the Germans 40 miles from Paris all the way back to the River Aisne, which is the site of the first battle of the Race to the Sea. Now, I've said Race to the Sea several times, but I haven't yet explained what that is. So we talked about just now why Great Britain was able to render aid so effectively to Paris when it was about to be under siege. And the reason for that is because they were able to enter into France via seaport. Dunkirk, Calais, Boulogne, all of these places were able to allow the great British Army access to the battle fronts, which is critical when you're trying to feed an army, when you're trying to get actual troops on the ground. Obviously, if you're German, you're going to want to put an end to your enemy's resources. So the German idea is, let's get to those seaports, let's race to the sea and get there before the British Army so we can outflank them and cut them off without all of their resources. Obviously, England cannot afford, or France for that matter, the Allies cannot afford to have these seaports up to their north taken from them, so they have to get to the sea and not be outflanked, and they have to in turn have to flip this in the video. They have to outflank the German army. So we have two armies. We have the British army over here, and we have the German army over here. And each of them are digging deep trenches and battling back and forth, inch by inch and mile by mile, up the coast, up towards the coast of Belgium and France, slowly trying to get to these seaports, trying to dig faster than the other ones, because remember, this is World War I. We have trench warfare, we have artillery, we have whole troops of people trying to push past, and they're digging in and entrenching themselves against the other forces. So it's not just a foot race, it's actually a dirt race up these sort of winding path to try to get to the ocean. Not the ocean, I'm sorry, the strait. And along the way, they're fighting constantly with each other. These are long, grueling battles, and it's absolutely crucial to each army that they get there first. Remember, to flank somebody is to literally come along the side. If you're going to try to flank another thing with a military term, you're going to try to go around the side and then get behind. So if we have France on this side with the British army and the French army, the Allied army, and you have Germany over here with occupied Belgium. Remember, they took Belgium by storm and have occupied it. It's under their control ever since the first weeks of the war. So we have the German army here in occupied Belgium, and we have the Allied army over here in France and at the Battle of Ypres that took place in Belgium, we start to see that these battles are weaving their way through the countryside all the way up. Germany needs to obviously cut off the other army, but they also need this last battle, the last of the three, Ypres, they need to keep the Allied army from outflanking them, because behind the German army on the Belgian front, there is a system of railroads that are being used by the German army to get troops from place to place where they need to be. Not only to get troops, we've talked about how important it is and what an important resource food is, how expensive and how necessary it is to the outcome of the war, whether or not you're able to feed your army that's able to do the fighting. So the system of railways that they are protecting in Belgium, if they are outflanked by the Allied army, then those railways will be literally undefensible. There will be no way to keep the Allies from destroying those railways and rendering this northern German part of their army completely separate from the southern part of their army and also separate from any resources. So it would be almost like essentially halving the German resources if the British were able to outflank them. So remember, the British couldn't afford to be outflanked because they couldn't have these seaports of Calais and Dunkirk taken from them. They needed to be able to bring in their resources and bring in their troops. And similarly, Germany couldn't afford to be outflanked because they couldn't afford to let the Allies into occupied Belgium. So we fought the first battle of the race to the sea. Is called the Battle of Aisne, and that's the very most southern point of this race. And from there, both sides just kind of looked at each other for a moment and then took off as fast as men can dig, all the way up the coastline where they fought the second battle, which is the Battle of La Bassée. Battle of La Bassée, literally these are all ending as sort of stalemates as they're trying to repeatedly just get past each other, and they just keep going north, not able to pass each other. And then they finally get to the first Battle of Ypres. And when I say the first battle, you'll have to be tuned in to how important this particular area is in World War I history, because there are 5 battles of Ypres in World War I. There are 5 that are that important, because neither side can afford to lose Ypres for those aforementioned flanking reasons that we talked about earlier. So when we get to the first Battle of Ypres, and the second battle is the most important and the most well-known, but the first Battle of Ypres is incredibly important. It started on October 31st, as with Halloween, and it continued back and forth until November, late November. It was like the 22nd of November when the battle finally ended, with rounds of artillery shots, many casualties, because literally neither army could afford to lose their positions. So it was a grimy, just terrifying time. Imagine living literally in a long trench, is literally just a long hole, living in a long hole for months on end, having dug, and you get the coldness and wetness and dampness of a European winter impending, surrounded by men who have been fighting for months or who may have even been killed in battle. This is not a luxurious way to battle. This is, gone are the times of lining up soldiers and marching towards each other. This is gritty. This is literally muddy and dirty and wet and bloody, and it's a very unpleasant and pleasant experience. Now, at the end of November, when the first Battle of Ypres finally ended, it ended a little bit more on the Allied side than the German side. And I say a little bit more because there were such heavy casualties. the Germans fell back further into Belgium. And so technically the Allies did win that first battle because they maintained control of Ypres over the winter. Obviously, battles tend to cease during the winter months and then pick up back again the next following spring when the weather is more suitable for warfare. You think going outside like, it's a prime war season, and essentially that's true for agriculture and it's true for war. You look for the right time to actually do the premium fighting, or you suffer losing resources and men to elements that you can't control. So when it was apparent that the fighting would go on, Germany fell back and decided to regroup when they would take over fighting again in the following end of April, early May. That would be the Second Battle of Ypres, which we will look at next week. Second Battle of Ypres is even grislier than the first. And to put that into perspective, at the First Battle of Ypres, at the end of November, when all was said and done, the Allies lost 100,000 men. 100,000 men. The Germans, slightly worse, they lost 130,000 men. So combined in total, nearly 250,000 men died at this one particular spot, both of them refusing to have a stalemate over the other. These are incredibly important. It's an incredibly important spot, literally on the Belgium map and on the map of entire Europe and in the World War I theater. It's incredibly important to keep Ypres and all of the battles there under consideration when you're looking at World War I. And so when you look at your assignment for today, and you look at being able to explain why could the German army not afford to lose Ypres? Why could the Allied army, why couldn't they afford to lose Ypres? And then imagine what must have been like to have been living in the trenches, literally in the trenches, alongside men that you have come to know and trust for months and months and months, only to live in the uncertainty. Will I fight the next day? Will I know? Will the next day be my last day? Be in the mud, in the rain, in the blood, in the horror that is World War I. Imagine what it might be like to be in this particular battle. These are things I want you to consider as you are going through this blog post and you're going through your lessons today. As always, you can text me or email me any questions that you have about this particular battle, any resources, anything that you are interested in looking at, or if you can think of a way, hey, I'd like to know a little bit more about this. We're trying to make this as interactive as possible. Guys, I will see you tomorrow. Bye.